translation before, right? And I'll get copies of these. That's
That library is so fast.
it shuts off after 2 minutes? No. You know what, Brenda? I'll take them with yours and then send them to me. Yeah. I don't think I want to be through the microphone and giving my password.
That's just on YouTube, all
Yeah.
across the country.
Okay, I think we're all set. Hi, everybody. What a great turnout for tonight's event. My name is Mylène Simard. I'm an event facilitator here at McNally Robinson Booksellers. Before we begin, I'd like to acknowledge that we are in Treaty 1 territory, and the land on which we gather is the traditional territory of the Anishinaabe, Aniniwak, Anishinaabe, Dakota, and Dene people. And in addition, it's the homeland of the Métis Nation. In addition, McNally Robinson itself rests on the land once occupied by the Métis community of Roostertown. We are gathered here tonight to celebrate the Winnipeg launch of Rising, a quiet, joyful picture book from Sidura Ludwig that celebrates a Jewish mother's tradition of making challah with her child. We're grateful to Candlewick Press for publishing this volume and for their assistance in planning tonight's evening. Following the formal part of tonight's program, there will be an opportunity to ask questions. If you are one of those here in person, please raise up your hand. I will approach you with a microphone so that the people watching from home can hear your questions. And if you are watching on our YouTube stream, please feel free to type in your question in the chat and we will pass it along. Hosting the conversation tonight with Sidura is John Longhurst. John Longhurst has carved out an impressive career in journalism, media relations, marketing, and communications, working for organizations such as Canadian Food Grain Banks, Mennonite Central Committee, and Mennonite Disaster Services. Longhurst organized Canada's first major conference on faith and the media in Ottawa in 1998, and in 2021 received the Lieutenant Governor's Award for the Advancement of Interreligious Understanding in Manitoba. His book, Making the News, An Essential Guide to Effective Media Relations, was published in 2006. He's written over 900 columns and over 600 articles about faith for the Winnipeg Free Press over the past 2 decades, and continues to cover the faith beat for the Free Press and many other publications. Our very special guest this evening, Sidura Ludwig, is an award-winning author of books for adults and now for children. Her short story collection, You Are Not What We Expected, won the Vine Literary Award for Fiction and was shortlisted for the Danuta Gleed Award. Her novel, Holding My Breath, was shortlisted for the Winnipeg Book Award. She has 2 books for kids out in 2024, her debut picture book, Rising, and her debut middle grade novel, Swan, in the fall. Sidura holds a master's in journalism from Carleton University, as well as a master's in fine arts from in writing for children and young adults from the Vermont College of Fine Arts. Originally from Winnipeg, Sidura now lives in Thornhill, Ontario, with her husband, 3 children, and a geriatric Havanese dog. Sidura's first job was as a bookseller at McNally Robinson Booksellers in Kenniston Village back in the day when that location was open, making this an even more special evening for all of us. Please give a very warm welcome to Sidura Ludwig.
Thank you very much for that wonderful introduction. Thank you all for being here. It's so special to look out and see so many familiar faces and people from the very beginning for me and beyond and my family. And I can't thank you enough for sharing this with me. I would like to start by reading from the book. And one of the beauties of writing a picture book is that I don't just have to read an excerpt. I can actually, read the whole thing. So It's called Rising. It's by me. It's illustrated by Sophia Vincent Guy. And I'm just going to read. And because you're not kindergarten kids, I won't stop and ask you questions all the way through it. Rising. I rise with Ima in the early morning. She places her special bowl on the kitchen counter. Yeast bubbles in the warm water. My hot chocolate and her tea sit beside it, steam from both our cups rising. I stir with a wooden spoon, flour, then oil, eggs, sugar, and a bit of salt. Everything separate, then mixed together. We knead the wet dough. It sticks between our fingers. At this point, I ask the kids, what does it feel like when you're kneading? And they say Play-Doh. We keep pressing, pushing more and more. The dough becomes a ball, shiny and round. We tuck it under a towel like a baby sleeping. It rises and we wait. Ima says everything grows in its own time. Little bubbles expand the dough from the inside. It swells slowly like a deep breath. We split the dough into 6 parts, roll them out like snakes, and then we braid 6 strands into each loaf of challah. Just as 6 days of the week become one Shabbat, everything from the past week comes to rest. The challah rises again. We tidy up because Shabbat is coming. Our challah bakes, rising with the heat. A golden crust forms, shining like the sun through our window. Our challah is done, but too hot to touch. 2 loaves resting, cooling, waiting, while we get ready for our time to rest. Covered on the table, our challah sits. We change our clothes. Abba sets the plates. Ima pours my grape juice. We're ready to honor Shabbat as we do every week. Our challah is ready for hamotzi lechem min haaretz, our bread from the earth that we made together, that we will eat together. We bless the candles. We say kiddush. We say hamotzi. We say thank you, Hashem, for so many blessings. Our challah is for sharing, for slicing and tearing. We add a sprinkle of salt for the times we've cried, sometimes a dab of honey for the sweet times to come. I use my piece to sop up the last bit of soup. It is my last bite before I'm too full. Our challah is crumbs on the table and floor. I am too sleepy to take myself to bed. We are all ready to rest tonight, each one of us, all over the world. Until tomorrow and the next day and then the next, when we come together ready to rise again.
Sure.
I never get to read the author's note.
Please do.
Okay, kindergartners aren't interested in my author's note. Challah is a special bread Jewish people eat every week for Shabbat. I make my own challah, and it's one of my most favorite times of the week. When I make challah, either Thursday night or early Friday morning, it means Shabbat is coming. Shabbat is a time when my family and I take a break from all of our work. We use no technology, we don't answer the phone, we don't write or do any schoolwork. It's a time for us to be together without any distractions, to thank God for our many blessings, and to be with our community and friends around our table for joyous meals. Challah is the center of those meals. I love being able to share something I've made from scratch with my friends and family, because above all else, challah is really meant for sharing. Here's the recipe I use. Lori Grisman shared it with me. Now I will share it with you. When you make your challah, it'll be like we are baking together. And my recipe is here, well, our recipe. Anyway, thank you.
Thank you, Sidura. I should say that before tonight, Sidura and I had a Zoom call, and she helped me pronounce challah because I haven't said it before. But the story of how you make it, there's something related to COVID, the pandemic.
Yeah.
And how did that become so important to you and your family?
So the story behind this book and how it came to be, if we go back 4 years, first of all, it takes a long time for a picture book to get published. So if we go back 4 years to around March, April 2020, when everything shut down, I was used to working from home, but I wasn't used to everybody in my house working from home, and my children in the school. We all remember. I don't need to take you all back to that. But you know, what strikes me most when I think back to that time in the early days of the pandemic is just how unstable everything felt. Really, that in the beginning, where we just didn't know from day to day what was going to happen, what new restrictions were going to come, our whole routines were thrown upside down. And yet I found that the one thing that didn't change for me was that every Friday morning I still got up early, I still took out my bowl, I still made the dough for challah, I still prepared the other foods that my family enjoys on a Friday night. And then, you know, at the appropriate time, we were still lighting our candles and sitting down, even though it was just the 5 of us, we may not have had guests, but we were still sitting down at the table together, the blessings that we always do. That routine of getting ready for Shabbat and then observing Shabbat, that didn't change. And that became a real anchor for me at a time when otherwise I felt very unstable. So there was that aspect. And then at the same time, I was doing my MFA in writing for children and young adults. And that particular semester, my focus was just on picture books. A challenge, I would add, when the libraries are closed and you have to read 200 picture books in a semester. And so I had, you know, but I had to produce. I had to produce manuscripts for my course. And my advisor had challenged us to write a nonfiction picture book, and so this was what came out of that challenge for me. I wouldn't call this book nonfiction now, but it was that meditation on what it meant to make challah and how it really was more than just a loaf of bread. Yeah.
Well, tell me more. Tell me more about what it meant to you personally as you made. As you thought about it during the day.
You know, and I think and maybe it's, I don't want to say a benefit, but a consequence of having that kind of time when everything, you know, was upside down and backwards, and you start to reflect on things that you might not otherwise reflect on. But I realized, you know, that this challah was something that for me was my connection to my family, my connection to my greater community, my connection to my spirituality, to my faith, and that it, you know, and look, you know, my family, no one is satisfied anymore with a challah from the bakery. You know, it's got to come from my oven. So there's a certain amount of joy in making something that other people look forward to and enjoy, and you know, and be able to share. But that's really what it became for me.
And do you still do it?
Oh yeah. I'm absolutely. I'm still making challah, not this week because I'm here, but you know, otherwise I'm still making challah every week. You know, and I think it can't go without saying that it's troubling and difficult times right now, and my, you know, so having an anchor like that for me, having an anchor, not just the making the challah, but everything that comes with Shabbat and the observances for my kids, for my family, having something that they can recognize is a stabilizing force. It's been really, really important. It's been really, really important.
Does that speak to the importance of ritual?
Yeah, you know, and I hope with this book, I mean, I know I'm talking about from my own experience and from a Jewish experience, but I'm hoping that with that message can come through in a universal aspect in terms of ritual, because ritual doesn't just have to be religious ritual. But I think that maybe the difference between ritual and habit is something you do because you're used to doing it. Ritual is something that has meaning. And so, when having had the opportunity to meditate a bit on what it means to roll out these strands of dough every week, there's that meaning I get to connect with that meaning every week, and then in that way share it with the people who are enjoying.
And through the book, are you hoping to encourage others to do something similar in their own families and lives?
I mean, I hope that I hope that with the book, that people will recognize, perhaps start conversations in their own families about, what kind of rituals are important to them, what, where do they find their joy, where do they find their strength. I don't know that I would go so far as to say that I'm, necessarily challenge anybody to start taking on challah or anything like that, but just that there's lots of ways that we can celebrate our families and our communities in our lives. And for kids, it's important for me. I talk a lot about myself in this book, but it's important for me to remember, and it's a picture book, so really my audience are kids. Kids really connect to that. Kids really connect to ritual, to the stability and in understanding what ritual is, but also in the greater meaning. And I think that's something that people will recognize in this book.
Even if they can't use words like ritual,
right?
They'll understand it.
Right. I'm going to be at the end of the month speaking at a conference in San Diego for the Association of Jewish Libraries, and I'm on a panel. A friend and I are doing a presentation together. She did her master's thesis in education on baking challah in the preschool classroom and the benefits of that. And she interviewed kids about their, about how they feel about it. And it's, it would be very simple answers that she got, but it came, through in her research, just how the kids connect to this process on so many different levels.
Okay, perfect. In answering a question earlier, you talked about something almost as an aside. During these troubled times, these are troubled times. Is there something in this ritual for you? It's something that speaks in a way as a balm for Jews during this time in Canada right now?
Yeah, there is. There is something for me in it's that anchor that I talked about before, the same anchor that I felt during the pandemic when there was all of this instability. I connect to that anchor now. And what can I say? It's when there's with scary incidents like rising anti-Semitism and everything feeling as if it's upside down. I think if we can find ways as a community to come together, if we can find, be it rituals or opportunities to connect with one another, that there's a lot of strength in that. There's a lot of strength in remembering, the love and the joy that we can have when we come together as families. And what I really hope with this book, if there's one thing that I really hope people take away from this book is the Jewish joy, and that it's really important to celebrate that kind of joy, and to celebrate what our community has to share.
And you just learned recently that your book was chosen by, tell them.
Yeah, so that's right. This book is a PJ Library book for June. For those of you, thank you. I've been told it's a PJ Library book. Has anybody received their PJ Library books yet? No, not yet. Okay, I expect pictures when you do. You may or may not get it. I don't remember if it's going out for kids who are 3 or 4 years old. For those of you who don't know what PJ Library is, it's a monthly. It's a monthly I call it subscription service, but it's supported by the Jewish community, and every young families can sign up. And every month, the family receives a book, a picture book for kids, because it's really, and there's a PJR rate, so it goes even higher. To get picked up by PJ Library means that my book, and they print their own edition. It's a softcover edition and with the flaps. it means that my book is going to be landing in 30,000 North American homes, which is incredible to me. Just like that, to have that kind of reach is incredible. The other part of this that I shared with John earlier was that PJ Library also contracted with me to do 4 translations because it's actually all over the world. So Rising is going to be translated in German, Portuguese, Spanish. What am I missing? German, Portuguese, Spanish, and?
German.
No, I said German. It wasn't French.
Italian.
I'll come up with it. There's 4 languages, I promise you. And it's being published in 4 of them, and it's not any of the ones you guys have just said. But yeah, so anyway, and so there's going to be even more of a reach that way, which is, and I've never had a translation before, so that's also exciting.
And so I was telling her that she can now say she's an international best-selling author. So here we hold a book in our hands. Looks pretty simple, but I know it's not. What goes into making a children's book?
So a picture book as opposed to a novel. A lot of, I said it takes a long time for a picture book to get published, actually longer for a picture book to get published than for a novel to get published. When I wrote the first draft of this, like I said, about 4 years ago. I signed on with an agent that a year later, a year after I wrote the book was when it got picked up by a publisher. So it's been sitting, so 3 years from when it got picked up from my publisher till now. So what happens is if you are an author as opposed to an author illustrator, your manuscript gets, all going well, accepted by a publisher, and that means that an editor has decided they want to acquire your manuscript. They take it to acquisitions meeting. The publisher altogether decides they want to have your, and then you sign your contract, and the editor and the writer then work together on polishing the manuscript. Once the manuscript is polished, then the publisher starts to look for an illustrator. And a lot of people don't know, when people speak to me about the book, they always ask me, how did you find your illustrator? And I say, I didn't find my illustrator. My publisher found my illustrator. I was consulted, so they got in touch with me with sort of a short list. They all looked amazing to me. I'm the least visual person on the planet, so anybody that can draw more than a stick figure, I think is fantastic. But she was my first pick, Sophia, and they approached her, and she really wanted to do the project. So that's how. And then we don't collaborate. The collaboration really happens on the page. So it's not that Sophia and I then discuss, or that she asks me what I was envisioning in terms of illustrations. My first, when I get to see what she has in mind when my publisher sends me some of her drawings, some sketches, and so on. And so I was starting to see the book unfold through Sophia's eyes as this went along. I had the opportunity to comment, if I wanted to, but it really at that point it becomes our book, and so it's not just mine, it's hers as well.
And you have some other books in process,
yeah.
Is that correct?
Yeah. I've got the middle grade novel coming out in the fall. That's with Nimbus Publishing from Halifax. That is a historical fiction novel in verse. And it's about a woman, it's based on the life of a woman named Anna Swan, who lived in Nova Scotia in the mid-1800s and grew to be almost 8 feet tall. And in my novel Swan, I've imagined what her childhood might have been like when she was 12. So that's coming out in the fall. And then Candlewick, which this book is publishing 2 more of my picture books. Those are also Jewish themed. The first one is around the holiday of Sukkot, and then the second one takes place at a Hanukkah party.
And I want to just tell you up front that your parents did not ask me to ask this question, but how did we let you get away? And what about the Winnipeg Jewish writing community? You and I talked a little bit about this before we went out.
Yeah.
But we in Winnipeg sometimes don't appreciate what we have here. And well, you've been away long enough, you can appreciate it.
Look, it's not just the Winnipeg Jewish writing community, it's the writing community and the creative community. I don't think any city can really compete with what Winnipeg has produced, continues to produce, but not just produces, but the way it supports its creative artists. That's something I really miss, and I really, really miss it. And one of the pleasures of being able to come back here and celebrate this book is because of that. You know, as a teenager, as Yanan said, I worked at McNally Robinson's at Kenaston Village, and that had a huge impact on me as an aspiring writer, to be, you know, surrounded by book lovers, to be surrounded by amazing literature and, you know, events like this and so on. You know, that just to be surrounded by that meant that I knew that it was something that was possible. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think it's I think Winnipeg is really, I think Winnipeg is both really, it's not just that Winnipeg is lucky, Winnipeg has a lot to be proud of when it comes to especially when it comes to the creative arts.
Oh, thank you. And now we're proud of you, even though you went to Toronto. But now it's your turn. Do you have any questions for Sidura? Something you'd like to ask her or share with her that we haven't had? And here comes a mic.
I don't need a mic, I speak very loud.
Okay, go ahead.
I've been a teacher.
Maybe you should stand though, so we can make sure to hear you really, really well.
I think I have more than one question, is that permissible?
Sure, please.
First of all, have you thought about having it translated into Hebrew?
I'm sure I've thought of it. It's more a question of an Israeli publisher or a Hebrew publisher purchasing the rights. Yeah.
What is the age that it's really aimed for, in your opinion?
4 to 8. 4 to 8 years old.
So I should buy one and take it home to my youngest granddaughter.
You should buy for all your grandchildren. It can be appreciated by everyone. Yes, but you know, it's a picture book. So you know, so it's when I go into schools, and I've had the privilege of, in the last couple of weeks, doing a number of different school visits. I'm speaking to kindergarten students. I'm speaking to grade 1 students, grade 2 students. You know, they're amazing.
And I live in Israel, and she talks Hebrew. That's why I want to buy her an English book.
Oh, and the illustrator lives in Israel. Yeah, she lives in Herzliya.
Any other questions? Yes, right there, please.
You know I would ask the question. I know you finalized and refined your book, your manuscript. How many recipes did you go through before you refined your quality?
That's a great question. Thank you, Auntie Sora. How many recipes did I go through before I found this recipe? You know, I came to baking challah pretty late in my baking, I won't say career, but you know, adventures. I feared yeast for a very long time. Many of you here know my mother is a wonderful baker, but she did not bake with yeast. And so, you know, so that was new for me. I want to say that I've probably, not that many, maybe 4 or 5 ones that I've tried. I had another recipe that I did for a long time that I kind of adapted on my own. I used maple syrup. I called it the Great Canadian Challah. And then this one, Laurie Grisman shared with me when my daughter was turning 12, and she was part of a bat mitzvah group, and we needed a recipe that we could easily do with the other girls in the shul. And I just really liked the way the dough worked together, and so I started. Oh, and it makes 3 loaves, which was really important to me, to make a lot of loaves. So that's when I started doing this one, and now I do it by heart. Like it really has. It becomes organic when you do it that many times. That and your banana muffins.
There was a question over there.
Hi, how are you?
I'm good.
Okay, I know you and your illustrators seem to have worked very well together, but have you heard through rumors or urban myths or something in the publishing industry of unhappy dealings between writers and illustrators?
I don't listen to gossip. I mean, for sure that could happen. And there are certainly times when, you know, when the illustrator and the author may disagree on certain things. There were things that I pushed on with, and by the way, if I had something to comment, I did not comment directly to Sophia. I commented through my editor, who would then go to the art director, who would then pass it on to Sophia. So you hope it's not broken telephone by the time it gets there. But you know, it's what's really important, what I learned anyway with this, is the magic that happens in collaboration, and that when you're doing a picture book, you have to be able to let go as a writer. You really have to be able to let go in order for that magic to happen.
Was that hard to do, to let go?
Not for me. No, I'm not a type, I'm really, I'm not a type A person. I am more than happy for somebody else who is much better, you know, at these things than I am, to take the reins that way. And I'm just so excited about, you know, oh, and Sophia is going to be illustrating my next picture book as well.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Anyone else?
The story behind the photographs and how the mother and the child reminded you and I of your younger sister, Yafa.
Yeah.
When is uncanny because there were no, photographs that were transferred from here to Sophia.
Again, she would not have had any way of knowing certain things that ended up in this book, and that's just magic, right? So yeah, so you know, we happen to think that the mother and the child happen to look both like my sister now and my, you know, when she was little. But you know, beyond that, the bowl that they use, my challah bowl, looks like this. It's a white ceramic bowl with blue flowers on it, and there was no way for her to know that. There's a tea set in here. I have a teacup that matches the tea set in here, and I was drinking from it the other day while I was leafing through this book, and then took the picture of the two of them together. It's just that's part of the magic.
Anyone else? There we go.
Will you be available to read this book by FaceTime to toddlers who don't want to go to bed?
Anytime, especially to my favorite toddlers. Tonight I could do it in person. Yeah.
I have a question for you. Did you start writing adult fiction and move to children's, and what's the difference there? And I always feel like it's very brave to write children's literature after you've gone the adult way, because you have to be so economical. You have to, you know, you can't just like write everywhere top of your mind. You have to start thinking, okay, I have to make this concise and engaging.
Every word counts, especially with writing picture books. So yes, I did start. I mean, I think most of you here know I did start out writing for adults. And I don't like to say that I've stopped. I just, for now, these are the stories that I'm telling. I knew I needed to change. I knew I needed to change. I knew even before my last book came out, the book of short stories, that I needed to feel some excitement again in my work that I wasn't feeling. And so I love taking courses. I love being a student, and so I think it was through U of T Continuing Studies. It was an online course, an introduction to writing for children and young adults, and I did that, and I was like, wow, I love this. You know, I want more of this. And so, you know, at that point, I also knew I wanted to go back to school, but an MFA in a basic, I don't want to say basic, but an MFA in writing program wasn't exciting me. And then everybody kept saying, check out this program at VCFA. So I did, and it really, you know, it felt like the right place for me. What I love about writing for kids is there's so much variety in the types of stories being told depending on who you're writing for. So, you know, board books to picture books to nonfiction picture books to middle chapter books, then middle grade, then YA, very different audiences, very different intentions all along. So there's always a challenge, and I like that challenge. Most picture books, you should know, are no more than 500 words. 500 words is not a lot, but each one of those words has to count. There's no, you know, you can't waste time. And you know, with a picture book, you start to, when you're writing it, you start thinking about page turns. How does the page turn increase the tension? Not that there's tension in this book, but right, like think about when you're reading books to kids, they always want, what's going to happen on the next page? So as I'm writing, I think about that. Okay, so you know, where's the natural break here? Where's the similarly with the middle grade novel, it's like that with the end of a chapter. Where is the natural break here that's going to encourage the reader to want to turn the page to the next chapter? So it's stuff like that I don't, you know, I never really thought about or had to think about when I was writing for adults, but I hope that, because I'm sure I'll go, you know, the right kind of story will come along and I'll go back to wanting to write something for adult. I hope that the lessons I'm learning here will translate, because every word should count there too. And keeping in mind one's audience and intention is important no matter who you're writing for.
Thank you, that's really interesting.
You mentioned when you were first beginning to speak about this, that you would no longer categorize this book as nonfiction.
I'll just repeat the question. You said earlier that you would not categorize this book as nonfiction. Why?
I think it's a lyrical, because it's a story. It's a lyrical story. It's a quiet story, but it's a lyrical story about a child and mother, a child and family getting ready for Shabbat. That's not to say that there aren't nonfiction elements in here. That is absolutely the routine. You know, if you follow the steps in the book, you would, with a recipe, you would end up with challah. But if you look at a traditional nonfiction picture book, it's going to be much more information centered than I think this book is. And really this book is more, it's more about the language and the meaning behind the ritual than an explanation of what the ritual is.
So when you read it to children, what have some of the kids said to you? After or during, or what
So
questions do they-
when I read it to kids, I try to keep it engaging by asking them questions all the way through. You know, so I'll ask them, you know, we cover the dough like under a blanket, like a baby sleeping. So I say, why do you think we cover the dough, you know, like a baby sleeping? It's interesting to hear their comments that way. We talk about kneading dough. We talk about when I do a presentation to kids and in a public school, I'll bring elements of Shabbat, so candlesticks and a Kiddush cup and a challah and a challah cover. So then I, you know, can you see the things that I've shown you? Do you see it in the book? And they get all excited. What I notice when I read it to kids is they quiet right down. For the most part, they're pretty engaged anyway. But there is something about story time that they just know. You know, they quiet right down and zoom in on it, which is wonderful.
So the questioner over there wondering about nighttime reading, that's for you.
Yeah.
Anyone else? Well, I have one more question to ask you then about the children's publishing industry. Now that you have entered into it, what's it look like? I know that the number of publishers has shrunk over the last 5-10 years. It's getting harder to publish books, but what's it? If anyone out there wanted to become an author, what would you tell them about this?
Write some more, write more drafts. Look, it's similar, you know, to publishing for adult fiction in that you really, if you want to publish in a traditional way, you need to go work with an agent for the most part, and then it's all about relationship building. There are a number of smaller presses that are, you know, independent smaller presses that are quite significant in terms of their reach and what they're doing. In general, the kidlit writing community I find to be a very supportive community, and that I'm enjoying a lot. It feels a lot less competitive, say, than when I was milling about in the non-kidlit world. So that's, I think, what my biggest takeaway so far.
Perfect. One more chance if anyone wants to ask a question.
Is there a call up behind the screen?
No, sorry. But you can buy a copy of the book, and then I have a recipe for you right here. Yeah.
Okay then.
Final comments about the book, or?
I feel like I've talked a lot. Like I just can't thank you all enough for joining me and helping me to celebrate this. And it really means the world to me to see you all here. So thank you so much.
And thank you, Sidura, for coming.
Thank you both so much. We will now move along to the signing portion of the evening, which will take place at the table to my right. Feel free to pick up a book, have it signed, but please remember to pay for it before you leave the store. You can imagine why we have to say that. Thank you again to Candlewick Press and to all of you for joining us both in person and online. Please join me one more time in acknowledging John Longhurst and of course Sidura Ludwig.
Over there as well. Right on time on this.